People who cut off their family, what horrific things did they do that made you finally walk away? I grew up in a family that looked perfect from the outside. 4 kids and parents as a solid unit. One thing we never talked about was my dad's explosive anger, which led to episodes he would never apologize for. We were expected to just be nice afterward and brush it under the rug. By the time I was 31, I had been working with my father as a financial planner for 6 years, helping grow our client base. My mother and younger sister worked with us as assistants. The problem was that every 6 months to a year, I would get fired by my dad. There would be a massive blow-up and a "F you, I have everything, and you have nothing. Get out, and I will never talk to you again." Then, within a day or two, he would be nice again, making promises to put things in writing, and we'd all just forget it. But you can only bring up that contract so many times before worrying you might trigger another episode. He would say things like, "You really think I would throw you, my daughter-in-law, and the grandkids out on the street?" You think, no, of course not. It's just what he threatens. And yes, it scares you, but no, he wouldn't actually do that. Surprise, that sips, what happens? The business value almost triples. He tortures me until I lose 17 pounds, and I'm already a skinny guy, and I quit, walking away with nothing. We end up hiring a company that specializes in family businesses for over $20,000 to help solve our family crisis. Specialists, psychologists, and lawyers are all involved. They write a report after interviewing every family member multiple times for hours, including my siblings who don't work there. When the report comes out, my dad loses his mind and fires the company that wrote it. I make peace that it's all over and start interviewing just to work at a bank. I haven't been paid in almost 6 months. I have 2 daughters, 3 years old and 1-year-old. But then my dad comes back, starts making promises again, and rehires the family business specialists. We have a meeting where I agree not to take the position at the bank after 3 successful interviews. I will manage the business while my father vacations for a month, and he will sell me my own clients. I agree because I don't really want to work at the bank. My dad leaves on his trip. I think things are finally getting worked out for the 10th time, but when he comes back a month later, he won't answer my calls. I go to see him in the office and bring my 1-year-old, who hasn't seen him for 4 months. He says he is going to finalize the list of clients I am to buy. I haven't talked to my dad since. That was over 6 years ago. He ended up getting me fired from our investment dealer because I contacted his clients, even though he had either never met them or they were some of my best friends. Then he sued me. I had no money and no way to fight him, so I abandoned everything and started over. I don't talk to my dad, mom, brother, older sister, grandma, aunts, uncles, cousins, or many family friends. They all bought my father's narrative. The patriarch said, "Get out," and everyone else just let it happen. Only my younger sister who worked there knows what really happened, and we are very close. We both just don't talk to the rest of the family. My wife and I are way better off now and incredibly happy. I made more money last year than I ever would have imagined, and I'm my own boss. Story 2. My uncle and aunt, whom I lived with from the age of 15 to 19, always treated me as an inconvenience, even though they were the ones who suggested I go live with them. They had me clean up after them and their kids. They got mad at me when I ate too much of their food, which caused stunted growth and contributed to an eating disorder. They made fun of me for being depressed and always discouraged me from doing any extracurricular activities at school because they didn't want their kids to seem mediocre. They overshared family secrets with me and made me feel like I had to carry the same resentments toward others in the family just to be welcomed into their home. To this day, I still have trust issues with nearly everyone in my life and rarely allow myself to make new friends. Story 3. My dad passed away the day before Father's Day. She who birthed me openly disregarded every one of his final wishes, including the place of burial. Since then, I've gone full scorched earth. Never mind the years of physical, psychological, and financial abuse she and he meted out to both of us all our lives. I was prepared to forgive her up to that point. For him, no. She called my father weak for not making his wishes known to her and claimed that mental illnesses were a hoax, a crutch for the weak. I informed her right then and there that I was no longer her child, and that she could rot in the miserable mausoleum she calls a house. I am organizing a proper memorial service the way Dad wanted. I have been making covert trips to take everything of sentimental value from Dad's upstairs apartment when she is not home, and I have opened a separate bank account preparing for the day she dies. I plan to have Dad exhumed and reburied in the place he loved and wanted. I will make everything right that she has wronged. Mark my words, she is dead to me, and anyone who stands with her is an enemy. Story 4. My mom and dad had me when they were 18 and got divorced. Basically, when I was born, I was punted back and forth between them, while my nana actually took care of me the most. My dad remarried this horrible, abusive woman with 4 kids of her own. I continued to be punted back and forth between my mom and my dad with his new spouse. Then my mom, I guess, got tired of it and signed over her parental rights to my father and Mrs. Bish, stating she just wanted to put all this behind her and move on with her life. I saw her every 6 months or so for about 2 years, and then I never spoke to her again until I was about 22. I wanted to try to reconnect with her and try to have a mom, but I needed her to understand how her choices had affected me, how much they still do. I needed this to move forward if we were going to have any kind of relationship. Only, she wasn't interested in hearing any of that. She essentially told me that she didn't want to focus on the bad stuff and that we should just move forward. Sounds familiar, right? So, I cut her off. Plus, she's a Trump supporter with abhorrent views, and honestly, I think that's more what made me cut her off. Flashback, I'm living with my father and my stepmother. They have 3 more children together. The mistreatment begins when I'm very young. Harsh discipline, constant criticism, and blame for things I didn't do. I'm the only one who seems to face it this way. It's not just physical, it's emotional and mental too. My stepmother often tells me I don't belong, that I'm not really part of the family. She even has classmates watch me at school, which makes me anxious and afraid to trust anyone. I start isolating myself, sinking deeper into sadness. Eventually, I begin saying whatever I think might protect me, but when I'm caught, I'm called a liar, even for things I didn't do. To this day, that word still hits me harder than anything else. She treats me cruelly, pushing me to extremes and punishing me harshly when I can't keep up. I flinch around her from fear, which only makes things worse. She isolates me, makes me sit out in the sun for hours with no sunscreen until I'm blistered and shivering, and forcing me into humiliating situations in front of the whole family, like making me bathe in the backyard and spraying me with the hose. At times, I'm denied basic privacy and forced into situations that feel degrading and dehumanizing. I'm encouraged to read, which I actually enjoy. But if she discovers a book I like Harry Potter, she forbids me from reading it. I start going to the library during lunch just to sneak in time with the books I love. She manipulates and controls everything in our lives, even going so far as to destroy our home under suspicious circumstances, leaving us suddenly without our belongings. Some things can't be proven, but the timing and actions are too obvious to ignore. My dad is largely uninvolved. He works, comes home, and spends most of his time in front of the television. Sometimes he enforces punishments for my stepmother, but he never really intervenes or protects me. Eventually, she kicks both of us out, yet he stays checked out, detached, and disengaged. Through it all, I have court-mandated visits with my grandmother Nana, 1 weekend each month. She is my safe haven. Those weekends are a lifeline. A place where I feel seen, loved, and celebrated. Nana tells me I'm the child she was always meant to have because we're so alike. She makes me feel brilliant, talented, and unstoppable, reminding me that it's us against the world. Those weekends give me hope and strength to survive the rest of the month. Nana promises me that if nothing changes before I turn 18, I can come live with her and we'll see the world together. She teaches me French and how to write in cursive long before I ever learn it in school. She nurtures every bit of curiosity I have, giving me hope that my life can be bigger than the pain I'm living through. She writes letters to officials and reaches out to teachers, friends, and anyone who might help. She fights for me with everything she has, but nothing ever seems to work. My parents resent her for it, and every time someone investigates, I end up paying the price. I become the casualty in a battle between adults who should have protected me. By the time I'm 15, I've started sharing pieces of my story with my bus driver, who eventually contacts Child Protection Services. That's what finally gets me out. My parents don't fight it. They agree I can live with Nana as long as she doesn't pursue child support. Years later, my dad tries to reach out, but he refuses to apologize or acknowledge his part in what happened, so I block him. I live with Nana from 15 until 21. At first, life feels like the safe, happy place she promised, but it quickly becomes clear that she isn't prepared to be a full-time parent. She becomes short and angry, expecting me to have moved on from the abuse and refusing to acknowledge that therapy or support might still be necessary. She manipulates me, calling me ungrateful or evil simply for doing normal teenager things, like spending time with friends instead of following her interests. She makes me feel guilty whenever I want to spend time with my friends, so much so that eventually they stop inviting me out. She complains about being stuck at home while I'm out, even though she chose a flexible job that allowed her to support me when I was living with my parents. I feel obligated and like I owe her, and she uses that guilt whenever she can. She pushes boundaries with her anger and control, keeping me walking on eggshells. Eventually, I started dating a woman seriously. I come out to Nana, and at first it seems like she accepts me, but I later realize she doesn't. While she seems supportive of my friends who are LGBTQ+, she struggles to accept me being gay. She tries to undermine my relationship, belittling my girlfriend and involving my friends to influence me. Eventually, I go no contact until she can show she can behave respectfully. She promises to change, but when we meet again, the hurtful comments and manipulations begin almost immediately, making it clear she isn't ready to act differently. We go through this cycle a few times. The last time I spoke to her was when she refused to attend my wedding. She couldn't manage to behave for just one day, so I could have even one family member on my side of the aisle. I also later learned that she had been behind much of the back and forth between my parents when I was younger. By the time I'm 22, I've lost 4 parental figures and 7 siblings. I haven't spoken to any of them since, and when people ask, I simply say my parents are gone. My parents were deeply flawed. My biological mother was neglectful and uncaring, and my dad was checked out, abusive, and allowed his cruel wife to control and hurt me. My Nana, who was once my greatest hero, eventually became my biggest disappointment. Recently, I looked up my dad out of curiosity and discovered that none of his children speak to him. It seems he burned bridges with 2 of them, and the cruel woman turned the other one against him, which makes sense, as that child was very much like her. Story 5. Not me, but my boyfriend cut off his whole family except his sister, whose status is still pending. His mom was extremely homophobic and threw a major tantrum when he brought me to meet her, kicking us out of the house. His dad, parents are divorced, told him over the phone that he would rather have my boyfriend dead than gay. As soon as he hung up, my boyfriend started crying, and that has been the last time he spoke to his father. That's how bad it was. His sister is fine with us, but every time we see her, she acts really weird and flirty with me. It makes both of us uncomfortable, so he's asked her to stay away until she can handle herself. It's pretty messed up, but luckily they live in a different state. My family loves him and has basically adopted him as their own. I think they like him more than me. Overall, it's tough, but he's working through it. If you're a parent, or if a family member is gay or part of the LGBTQ community, please don't be an a-hole. Story 6. Mom and Dad offed my dog. They live on a farm and had begged for her because she was an Australian Shepherd and belonged on a farm. She was great and happy for a couple of months. Fast forward a few more months, my wife and I hadn't seen my parents in about a month. In passing, they mentioned she had gotten sick but was doing great. They had taken her to the vet and everything was fine. They said we would see them and the dog the following week when we went to the beach as a family. Approximately 2 days later, I saw a picture of her in the background of one of their horses, and she looked off. I called my parents to ask what was going on, and they said, "She's not looking good and won't make it to the beach next weekend." So I got up and drove 3 hours to get the dog. My wife took her to the emergency vet that night, while I stayed with the kids. They drained 10 pounds of fluid from her stomach. She had multiple portosystemic shunts in her liver. We found out my parents had taken her to the vet earlier and told them it would be too expensive to treat her, $1,200. We ended up spending about $10,000 trying to save her. In the end, they were unable to, but the vet said that if she had been treated earlier, it wouldn't have been a problem. My mom and dad tried to gaslight my wife and me, scolding us and saying it was our fault. In a way, it partly was for letting them take her. They never once asked how the dog was doing or even acknowledged what happened. Since then, they haven't tried to contact me or my children for the past 1.5 years. There's more to the story, of course, but I doubt anyone has made it this far. Story 7. The final straw was the way my mom terrorized my wife and me during our wedding planning. She constantly reminded us that she wouldn't be coming to our wedding then. One day before the shower, decided she didn't want to miss it. I involved her in every aspect of the planning the moment she wanted to be involved. She started fights with every single family member who had already been helping us the whole time. She even made my father cancel the favors we had picked out together for a better idea. She came up with just 2 weeks before the wedding. She made us come over 1 week before the wedding to help her finish making them. That night, while we helped her, she started an argument about how my grandfather, her dad, should have his own remembrance table because he was supposedly more active in our lives than my wife's grandfather. I stayed calm and reminded her that this wasn't a competition. It was my wedding. We were simply having pictures of all the loved ones who had passed, displayed on a table with a candle and a sweet quote. She told my wife that she didn't give a damn about her side of the family and called her a bitch. Then she spit in my face and punched me in the chest. She ordered us to leave and said she wouldn't be coming to the wedding. I refused to leave and pleaded with her to talk things out, so she called the police to have them remove us. My wife and I waited outside and spoke with the police. Once we got home, we received texts from her reiterating that she wasn't coming to the wedding. I begged for 3 days for us to talk things through, and she refused. My wife finally wrote a long, heartfelt message telling my mother she was officially uninvited from the wedding. We didn't hear a single word from her until the day of the wedding. She sent us texts 2 hours before the ceremony. No phone calls, no visits, even though we lived 10 minutes away. These last-minute apologies only came because real consequences finally happened. I turned my phone off before the ceremony. My mother-son dance was replaced with the DJ playing We Are Family, and everyone came to the dance floor to celebrate together. The next morning, my sister left the wedding hotel early since she had work. When she got home, my mom greeted her coldly. About an hour later, around 9 in the morning, my sister found her blue in bed. That morning, I got a frantic phone call from my sister, blaming me for our mother's attempt. Since the wedding and going no contact, my life has only gone upward. I'm not going back. Story 8. My mother was living with her mom for a few years after I moved out. The opportunity came up for her to buy her own home, and my grandma gave her inheritance early to help with the deposit. Long story short, as soon as my mother moved into her house, she abandoned my grandma. Doctor's appointments that had been arranged were simply ignored. My mother failed to show up to take her. I'm still not sure why she completely betrayed her, but at the same time, she also blocked her sister. My mother has no interest in patching things up and seems to think she is owed an apology. There was a bank account set up that required both my mom and my aunt's signatures to withdraw the money. Multiple attempts have been made for my grandma to access it so she could get new hearing aids, but my mom refuses to sign. I think what she's done is downright disgusting. I nearly disowned her in the heat of it. Screw her. Story 9. I never thought I'd carry 3 different stories of pain inside me. One from my grandmother, one from my mother, and one from my dad. Each of them broke me in their own way, and together they tell how I finally learned to walk away. My grandmother, on my father's side, grew up in Germany before and during World War II. She was part of the League of German Girls, the female branch of the Hitler Youth. As a child, I didn't understand what that meant. My only memories of her are gentle ones. She smiled a lot, gave me sweets, and smelled like old perfume, but I was only 4 when my family cut ties with her. She treated my mother poorly because mom didn't have the right look. Even worse, my grandmother denied the Holocaust her entire life, despite having lived through that time and moving to the US right after the war. It's strange to remember someone as kind in small moments and still know they clung to such twisted beliefs. Then there's my mother. She was controlling, manipulative, and emotionally draining in every way. Growing up under her was like walking on eggshells that never seemed to end. At 25, I finally had enough. I packed everything that fit into my car, had about $1,000 to my name, and drove to another state where I knew absolutely no one. It was terrifying, but it was freedom. For years, our relationship stayed distant. When I finally visited home for Christmas, the same cycle repeated itself. I argued with my dad, nothing new, and mom jumped in to take control. I tried to step away to calm down, but she followed, insisting that we fix things immediately. My dad, surprisingly, gave me space. My mom couldn't. When I said I was leaving the house for a bit, she warned me, "If you walk out that door, you're no longer my son." I walked out anyway. For the first time, I chose peace over her approval. We didn't speak for years. I got a call one day from a family friend telling me that my mom had cancer. Against my better judgment, I started talking to her again, but this time with some distance and clear boundaries. A part of me hoped that maybe with time and space between us, we could rebuild something better. It was still mostly one-sided with her narcissistic nature dominating every exchange, but I tried anyway. After all, she was my mom. Fast forward a few years and I was getting married. I wanted to include her to give her a chance to be part of something good. Inviting her, though, felt like pulling teeth. Still, I asked if she would make the corsages and bouquet, since she used to be a florist and genuinely loved doing it. I thought it could be her way of contributing her wedding gift to us. My sister, who still lived with mom and carried a lot of emotional baggage from our upbringing, was supposed to be one of my wife's bridesmaids. But mom had other plans. Instead of letting her come, she made her stay home to watch the dogs. At the wedding, my mom complained the entire time about how much work she had, how stressful it was, how tired she felt. Somehow, even on my wedding day, everything had to revolve around her. After the wedding, my wife and I moved to my family's cabin in a remote part of Colorado. We wanted to renovate it and make it our home. The agreement was simple. I would do repairs and renovations equal to the cost of rent, and mom could come visit whenever she wanted. Looking back, I see how naive I was, still believing somehow that family loyalty meant something. The cabin, however, was a crap. My grandparents, not the Nazi ones, but the other set, had been wonderful people, yet they grew up during the Great Depression, and like many from that era, they saved everything. Decades of clutter filled every inch of the place. Mom told me she had gone through it and cleaned it out. That was a frigging lie. There wasn't a single empty cabinet or dresser. The master bedroom was stacked floor to ceiling with junk. I offered to help her clean it up, but her inability to part with anything made it impossible. I spent 6 months working on that place and managed to clear out just one dresser, full of old greeting cards from my grandpa's time at the FAA. That was it. As if the mess weren't set enough, the cabin had no heat. In an area where temperatures drop well below zero and snow piles up to nearly 10 feet every year, that was dangerous. On top of that, mom expected me to first pay rent, second, fix the cabin, third, buy all the materials, fourth, pay property taxes. I tried reasoning with her, told her the place wasn't livable and needed major repairs, but she wouldn't hear it. She gave me an ultimatum, her way or the highway, and even threatened to evict me if I didn't pay the property taxes. That was it. My wife and I packed up our things and left. I told her we were moving out, and the last thing she said to me, the last words I ever heard from her, were, "I wish you had never been born." That sentence hit harder than any argument we'd ever had. It was cruel, but in a way, it made my choice crystal clear. That was the day I finally stopped hoping she'd ever be different. Fast forward several more years, mom's cancer had gone into remission, and I had moved on with my life. It felt good not having her constant chaos hanging over me anymore. Then one day, I got another call from a family friend. The cancer was back, and this time, it was aggressive. So, I started talking to her again. I didn't want to, but part of me still felt that old pull of responsibility. Things were rough. The cancer had spread, and she wanted badly for me to visit her. I didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed against it. But eventually, when it became clear that the end was near, I decided to visit. One last time. I figured it would be my goodbye. The visit got delayed for a bit, but I finally went to see her in April. She was in the hospital by then, weak and barely conscious. A week later, she was gone. During that final week, I sat by her bed nearly 18 hours a day, holding her hand as she faded. We said what needed to be said. I told her I loved her, she told me she loved me, and that was all the closure I would ever get. For the past year and some months, I've been the acting executor of her estate, a task that's been both exhausting and strangely healing. The one good thing to come out of it is that my sister and I have slowly rebuilt our relationship, something I didn't think would ever happen. And then there's my dad. As far as I know, he's still alive, but I don't talk to him anymore. I'm almost certain he's got some serious, undiagnosed mental health issues that have followed him his whole life. Growing up, he was verbally and emotionally abusive, constantly tearing me down, yelling and belittling. Sometimes it turned physical, but I thought that's just how dads were with their sons. Later, I learned he had also been physically aggressive toward my mom and sister, something he'd hidden well. He was the master of manipulation, the king of gaslighting. He could twist reality so fast that you'd start doubting your own memory. He even used threats to harm himself to control people and manipulate to make my mom stay or to win an argument. My sister carries deep trauma from those years. Due to this a-hole, scars she'll probably carry forever. Mom and my sister cut him off long ago, but my naive, stupid self thought I could still salvage something with him. After Mom passed, he suddenly became interested in my life. I wanted to believe it was genuine, that maybe therapy was helping him change. For a while, it even seemed that way. He was calmer, self-aware, trying. But soon enough, the same old manipulation started slipping through. I told him that he had to knock that mess off, or I was going to cut him off permanently. One day, he sent me a string of ranting text messages that I didn't have the emotional energy to respond to. 2 days passed, then 3. On the 3rd day, he sent another message. The same old guilt trip. You don't care about me. You'll see. I'll never talk to you again. Just watch. It was the same trick he'd used on my mom for years, threatening to harm himself just to get attention. But this time, I didn't bite. I blocked him. The man can rot in his freaking broken-down mobile home until the end. I'm done being his puppet. For context, I grew up in rural New Mexico, poor as dirt, in a crumbling mobile home. Summers meant walking miles to the grocery store in 100-degree heat because we couldn't afford gas. Winters meant freezing nights because the furnace broke when I was little and never got fixed. Dad put in a wood stove, but there was no insulation, no skirting under the house. The heat just vanished. I fell through the floor 3 separate times. Mice scurried in the walls. The house was filled with so much crap that only one narrow path remained from end to end. The kitchen sink was a graveyard of dirty dishes that hadn't been touched in years. When I was 15, my family moved an hour and a half away and left me behind to keep an eye on the place. They gave me $20 a week for food and gas, and $40 when it was time to refill the propane tank. In winter, I'd light a fire before bed, hoping it would keep me warm till morning. By 2 a.m., the house would be barely 10 to 15 degrees warmer than the freezing air outside. Sometimes it dropped below 15 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'd wake up with frost in my hair. The pipes froze, so there was no running water. I slept on the floor, listening to mice scratching through the walls. It was disgusting, but somehow it fit the house. Everything about that place was a twisted time capsule of neglect. I could write a whole book about growing up there. The noise, the cold, the smell of rot, the silence that came after every fight. Maybe someday I will. My grandma was a Nazi. My parents were abusive, and my sister and I should have been taken away by Child Protective Services. Story 10. It's difficult to know where to begin. My father was physically aggressive with my mother in front of me. I tried to stop him and he attacked me as well. I was 8. That summer, I was sent across the country to stay with my grandparents. When I returned, my father picked me up alone at the airport and told me he and my mom had split up and I was to stay during the week at her house. It was good that my mom left him, but she was far from wise. She dated other angry, damaged men. I'm not sure if she believed all men were like that or if being with unhinged men gave her a false sense of control. Who knows? She was probably cheating on my father. The spring before they broke up, I met the man who would become my future stepfather at their house. My mom claimed they were practicing important lines for a play. She was a drama teacher at a college and told me to stay outside with my little 2-year-old sister until she called me in. It was getting dark when my father arrived home, and he was puzzled why we were alone in the yard. Then they had a nasty argument about a man being over. When I came to live at my mom's new house, she started dating men immediately. I met the man she had practiced lines with, but she denied we ever met before. At one point, she was dating 4 men at once, Jay, D, and 2 Bruces. She broke up with Jay, her drama boyfriend, and one of the Bruces, D, stuck around. D was not fond of kids and showed it. He was very nasty to me. Meanwhile, when I stayed weekends with my father, he would sometimes disappear to parties or stare off into the distance after getting high. He got weekday custody because I was miserable at my school, and my 3rd grade teacher hit me. When I lived with him more regularly, he started becoming violent with me. One night, he was violent with my mom as they exchanged us. It was always at a bar because she was afraid of him. I ended up telling her that he hurt me too. She seemed shocked, which was strange to me because she had witnessed some of this before she left. She made the excuse that I was sick and kept me at her home, which he didn't know the location of at that time. It was right around my birthday, and I actually did end up getting sick for real. When we came home from a movie the night before my birthday, I got a fever and threw up. The next morning, I woke to screaming. My father and uncle were there, and a physical altercation had erupted between them and my mom and Dee. Then they rushed in, grabbed my sister and me, and took us. When we got to my father's home, he put his hands on my arm and said he'd snap it unless I told my mom. I exaggerated after he handed me the phone. I was terrified and wasn't sure what exaggerated meant, but I thought it meant I was lying. I tried to say no, and he tried to do as he said. When I told my mom what he wanted me to say, she let out a disgusted sigh. Even after I saw her alone and explained what happened, she always dismissed me. I guess I can understand her frustration. My father was an attorney. I wish I could say things got better, but they didn't. Hurt doesn't end with adulthood, it just changes shape. My mom got back together with the drama student when I was 11. They got married. This man acted very nicely until they married, and she told him he couldn't smoke anymore in the house. Then he started directing his anger at me. He'd scream until I was backed into a corner. If I tried to defend myself, he'd get physically aggressive. He'd do many things to start a fight, like calling me lazy and a future bag lady. Sometimes my mom would get mad at him, but then he'd cry and apologize. I was continuously told by my mom that I had to forgive him and my father too. She was suddenly friends with my father again. I think she was afraid, but also wanted to show the world that we were a normal family, or whatever that means. My father did many things to scare me afterward. He didn't hurt me physically as much in my teens, but he made my life frightening and made me feel worthless. My mom would nitpick at every little thing I did, but she didn't seem to care about anything that mattered to me. I was just an extension of her, something to show off. Both of my parents compared me in cruel ways to their exes, while my stepparents emotionally and physically mistreated me. When I became an adult and had a solid career, both of my parents thought it would be wonderful to pressure me into doing work favors for them. They claimed it would help me gain experience, but in truth, they wanted free services that would have cost them tens of thousands of dollars. I made the mistake of falling for it. When I quit working for both of them, they were furious. My father, in particular, cut me off completely. He was enraged that I stopped working for him, and he despised my boyfriend at the time, who was one of the kindest people I had ever met. Part of my decision to stop working with him came when his wife tried to take money from me by making me pay for things for them without paying me back. When I became pregnant, my father suddenly wanted to contact me again. We met once, then I miscarried. After that, he disappeared again. I decided at that point I had had enough of the manipulation and cruelty my next pregnancy held. One evening before Christmas, my husband, the once kind boyfriend, went out, and I heard a knock on the door. I thought he had forgotten his keys, but it was my father, standing on the porch with bags of gifts. I looked him in the eyes, shook my head, and said, "I'm sorry, but no." Then I shut the door and locked it. He left the gifts, and I had my husband unwrap and donate them. Within weeks, it felt like my mind had finally changed voices. I used to constantly beat myself up inside, but that stopped after I shut out my father. Living felt like finding a spring of fresh water after spending my life drinking from a toxic lake that always made me sick. The messed up part is that my mother raged at me for making this choice. She had left his violent self long ago, but denied that he ever hurt her physically. My stepfather went on and on about how wrong I was for not letting my father see our child because of so-called grandparents' rights. My mom invited me over to her house on my birthday. My child was almost 2, and my husband came with me. She started an argument about my decision to cut my father off. My stepfather stepped in and began yelling and insulting me. Suddenly, it felt like my teenage years all over again, except this time I was an adult, and my husband and child had to witness it. My stepfather got physically aggressive with me. My husband raised his voice and said firmly, "This is wrong." He then picked up my stepfather like he was a feather and pulled him off me. We got into the car. My child, my husband, and I were all in tears. My mom and stepfather kept walking toward the car, trying to talk us into coming out and rationalizing what had just happened. My husband pulled himself together and drove us away. He told me he never wanted to see my stepfather again, and that the man was never to be near our child. I tried to have only a relationship with my mom after that, but she kept pushing forgiveness on me. I asked her to stop arguing with me when I brought my child to visit because it made my toddler cry. She promised she would, but she didn't, so I decided to stop seeing her too. It has been 15 years since I last saw my father. My biggest regret is not cutting him off when I was much younger. I could have started healing and becoming a healthy person sooner. It has been 12 years since I've seen my mom, and this has been the most peaceful decade of my life. As far as I know, my extended family either believes I made everything up, since my mom told her relatives I was mentally unwell or something similar, or they've been through the same pain themselves. My dad's side has a terrible history of abuse and believes that burying your head in the sand and silently enduring it is somehow part of God's plan or something like that. I've been in therapy now and have found confidence and joy I never thought I'd experience. I have a loving family and dear friends who support me. I have a stable career and I'm an athlete. My children are thriving. I'm sharing this to tell anyone else out there, it can get better. It might take courage to walk away, but once you take that step and put in the work to heal, to practice self-care and self-love, you'll find peace, and you won't stay alone for long. Story 11. On Thursday, the 17th of October, 2019, my father and I set out to visit my granny, his mother, because she was very unwell. It had been the first time I had seen her since 2007. Our journey began at 6:30 in the morning, and it was a 6-hour drive just to catch the 2 p.m. ferry. After crossing the ferry, we arrived at her house around 4 p.m. and settled in. A dog was present. In the past, when my brother and I visited as children, we always shared the same room without exception. A few hours after settling in, just before dinner, I walked into this familiar room, thinking it was still mine, as I had not been informed otherwise. My father noticed me, but said nothing. On the bedside table, I smelled a strong odor of alcohol. After dinner with Granny and my uncle, I returned to the same room around 10 p.m. A few minutes later, my father stormed in, furious, demanding to know why I was in his room. Apparently, it was no longer my room. I admitted my mistake, but he accused me of entering deliberately, which, to be fair, was true. He began shouting. My uncle came to see what was happening, and my father ordered me to leave and go to my room. The following Friday morning, I woke around 10 a.m. and had a bowl of porridge for breakfast. My father entered the kitchen, saw me still in my pajamas, and, with visible disgust, remarked, "Look at you," angrily telling me that I was being blocked out of his will, that he was sending me home the next day, and that he would never, ever see me again. I remained silent, though he further reminded me that I was not deaf. After leaving the porridge unfinished because I disliked it, I went for an hour-long walk. Upon returning around 1 p.m., it was just me, my father, Granny, and the dog, as my uncle had already left. Around 2 p.m., he asked me to help with kitchen chores. The porridge was still on the table. I started washing dishes while he sat behind me at the table. For more than half an hour, he spoke in an extremely angry and aggressive tone, accusing me of refusing to eat the porridge. He berated me, claiming I had wasted my life, that he paid taxes for people like me to do nothing all day, and criticizing my mother for not helping me tackle my problems. He insulted her, calling her a cow, and spoke of supporting my brother to find a place of his own, which he allegedly refused. He also claimed he tried to support me when I was in primary school, around 6 or 7 years old, but that I had refused. Throughout this entire time, I remained silent. When he demanded a response, shouting, "Answer me," or "I need an answer," I stood my ground. When I refused to reply, he muttered in irritation, "Please yourself." The situation became unbearable, and I began crying, pleading for it to stop, but he continued. He moved closer, and I felt a surge of anger, almost striking him, though I refrained. He stepped away briefly. Nearby, a knife sat on the kitchen counter, and for a moment I felt a desperate urge to use it just to make the ordeal end. After finishing in the kitchen, he demanded my mother's mobile number, which I refused. He said he would get it from my brother instead. I called my mother to tell her what had happened, explaining how upset I was, and asked her to instruct my brother not to give her number. My father barged into my room without knocking, demanding to know who I was calling. I explained, and he walked out dismissively. Shortly after this, he returned to my room and began speaking to me for nearly half an hour, though his tone had noticeably calmed. He claimed that Mum was using me as a piggy in the middle to get back at him, which, in reality, was completely untrue, and insisted that if I applied for any job, no matter how well qualified I was, I would automatically be rejected because of my weight. As he put it, "Let's hire someone else." He reassured me that he was not against me, but his words carried a lingering weight of control. Then he asked if I was going to shave. I told him I didn't want to at that moment, but he insisted that I should, and that I should shave every morning because that is what normal people do. He also told me not to be afraid of the dog, claiming it wouldn't harm me. A while later, he called me into the kitchen to start the dishwasher. When I admitted that I didn't know how, he explained that he only wanted to prove a theory that I was pretending to be a genius. As I left the kitchen heading toward my room, he followed me angrily, ordering me to go to my room and warning me never to interfere in his affairs again. Not long after, he barged into my room once more, without knocking, and sat beside me. He raised his fist as if ready to strike. I met his gesture with defiance, saying, "Go on, hit me. You've been wanting to do that for the past day." Later, we went for a walk with the dog. Just as we stepped outside, I glanced at my phone for a mere 2 seconds to check for notifications. He noticed immediately and erupted with anger. As we walked around the house from the back to the front, he launched into a tirade about my generation's obsession with mobile phones, contrasting it with his own youth, when the nearest phone was miles away and life seemed fine without one. Along the road near the house, he stopped and turned to me in a disappointed tone, reminding me that I had promised to shave despite my earlier refusal. He suggested that we return to the house, telling me to go ahead with the dog. He continued speaking in the same angry tone, insisting that the trip had not been a waste because, in his words, it shows what I'm really like. He repeated that he was sending me home the next day and that he would never, ever see me again. Shortly after returning home, he called my mother, having obtained her number from my brother. Later, I found him in the kitchen, muttering to himself, irritated, saying, "If she thinks I'm a bad man, so be it." Finally, around 7:30 during dinner, he calmed down slightly and said we could forget about sending me home the next day. For the first time in hours, I settled in the living room away from him. He left me alone, and for the next few hours, there was a relative calm, a fragile peace that allowed me to breathe before going to sleep. Story 12. It is difficult to know where to begin. I was born partially deaf and with special needs. I am also identical to my grandmother, my mom's mother. My grandmother babied me because, starting at the age of 2, I had to go in for ear surgery every 2 years to get tubes. My eardrums are deflated. They still are, actually, because my mother, being such a narcissist, refused to pay for the surgery I needed at 18, claiming it was unnecessary because I was an adult. We'll get to that later. My grandmother passed away when I was 7, and that's when the abuse from my mother went into full swing, for reasons I still do not fully understand. She passed away in 2011, and my healing only began in 2016, after years of drug use, so I never got the closure I needed. My entire life, that woman was cruel to me. She repeatedly told me that I would only ever be an average slave worker in life, never able to achieve more. She did not believe I could go to college or pursue any higher education. So much so that when issues arose in high school with my credits, instead of advocating for me, she signed me out of school, claiming that working for 3 years at that point was all I would ever do anyhow. I never got to graduate from high school. She swore I would become a teenage mother at 16, even though I didn't lose my V card until 18. She constantly tore down my body image because I was a bigger girl, a trait that ran in our family. My mother, sister, and I were all bigger girls, but after my mother lost weight with a diet pill that was later taken off the market, she only targeted me for my weight, never her golden child, my firstborn sister. At the age of 8, I attempted to go off by myself for the first time. My mother claimed it was for attention, but it was because of her cruelty, and I wanted to be with my grandmother. She ignored my mental health completely. At 14, I developed an eating disorder, but in her eyes, fat girls couldn't have that, so she said. During this time, I continued having surgery every 2 years to insert tubes into my ears to allow me to hear somewhat. At 18, I was supposed to have reconstructive surgery on my eardrums, but my mother refused to pay, claiming I was an adult. She still claimed me on taxes, preventing me from qualifying for any assistance. The surgery never happened. Over time, I have slowly lost my hearing and developed a cholesteatoma in my left ear, for which I am scheduled for surgery on July 26th. In 2011, when my mother passed, I was also pregnant with a child I did not want. My abuser pressured me into keeping the baby because it was my mother's first grandchild, even though I was in active addiction. My mother passed away a month before the child's birth. The baby was taken by CPS at birth. I regained custody because I thought I was doing what was right. In hindsight, the right decision would have been to speak up about my feelings and put the child up for adoption, but I allowed the rest of my family to dictate my life. My sister took the majority of our inheritance, and with what little I received, I bought a trailer. It was a 2-bedroom place where I lived with my father and my daughter. In the year 2016, I was arrested while my dad was in the hospital. My brother and sister were contacted to take custody of my daughter, but both refused to take in their niece. My sister claimed she couldn't do it because she was starting her new job at Amazon, even though, to this very day, she still lives with her boyfriend's family. There's the boyfriend's mom and abuela who stay home, and they already watch her 2 kids. So, clearly, accommodations could be made when it came to her own children, but not her niece. My brother, oh freaking man, he claimed he couldn't take my daughter because he was staying at his first baby mama's family house, and they supposedly had no room. Yet, the very next day after I went to jail, he took it upon himself to clean out my bedroom, pack up all of mine and my daughter's belongings, put them in storage, and move himself, his first daughter, and his first baby mama into my home. So apparently he couldn't take his niece due to space, but had no problem moving his own family in, which in turn made it impossible for me to get my daughter out of the foster system. I was in jail for 3 months, and by the time I got out, I couldn't even evict him from my own home. The state refused to help me with housing because I technically had a home, even though they knew I was homeless. I was mandated to a full-time mental health and substance recovery program, and it took me 18 months to complete, all while being homeless. My family sat back, watched me struggle, and gossiped about me instead of offering help. In 2020, I finally moved across the country after the state of New Jersey took my parental rights in 2019, claiming I had run out of time to get my daughter out of the system. My father was the only one I still spoke to until he passed away this year. That was when I finally made the ultimate cutoff. My father lost his other leg in January of this year, right around my birthday, and in February he called me crying, begging me to bring him to Colorado to live with me. Of course, I said, "Absolutely, Daddy." But before I knew it, his condition took a turn for the worse. In March, a friend flew me out to see him, to say my goodbyes. It was heartbreaking beyond words. When I returned home, I became very ill myself. March was the last time I spoke to or saw my dad. He passed away on April 1st, 2023. A few days later, on April 4th, I found out my brother had convinced my dad to sign my trailer, the one I bought with my inheritance, over to him before his death. My father believed he had taken care of me in his will, but my brother and my scheming aunt had cut me out behind his back. On April 10th, I went back to the doctor because I was still sick. Blood work revealed I had an autoimmune blood disorder. I found that out on April 13th. Then, on April 27th, I finally saw the ENT specialist, who informed me that the surgery my mother refused to pay for when I was 18 had caused severe damage. The cholesteatoma growing in place of my retracted eardrum had deteriorated the bones inside. As of July 26th, I was told I would lose the hearing on my left side. All I have gotten from my family is pain, health issues, trauma, theft, loss of my daughter, genetic illnesses, and layers of abuse from every direction, topped off with crushing medical debt. Last year, I beat cervical cancer and lost 100 pounds, thinking it would finally be my year. Instead, this year defeated me. The family I have now is the one I am creating for myself. Life taught me early that blood means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Those born into loving, supportive families have a kind of privilege many of us never experience. I never even felt what genuine love was until I was 30, almost 31. I am 35 now and will be 36 in January. Story 13. For the longest time, I kept thinking about how unfair life was and how different my life would have been if I had a stable household with proper support. I started from scratch with literally nothing to my name. I graduated from college 5 years later than my peers. I still do not have a house yet, despite all my friends having bought theirs years ago, and so on. They all got multiple steps ahead of me in life because they had their parents to support them. It was hard not to compare myself to that, but I am immensely proud of the delayed mediocrity that I have carved out for myself. The hardest part about the whole experience, despite the abuse, was the attachment. I believe there is nothing stronger than the bond between parent and child. When I was growing up, I considered myself a mama's boy. I would snuggle up to my mother, constantly wanting to do things to make her happy and proud, and always wanting to spend time with her watching movies and such. Perhaps that was the rose-colored lens of childhood. Once I reached around 13 to 14 years of age, I began to see a lot of what she did for what it truly was. There was so much manipulation. She would show affection through intimacy immediately after getting physically aggressive on me, as if nothing had happened. She would layer on faux praise immediately after cutting me down with words, blaming me for being horrible or for all her problems in life. One of the most egregious incidents I can recall is when my sister did something minor and my mother snapped, but she blamed me for her woes. Then she attempted to harm herself in front of me, but I saved her just in time. She told me how brave I was and that I was a hero. It was twisted. Not long after that incident, and several other significant ones, I eventually realized that she did not genuinely care for me at all. I began to question her actions respectfully at first. If she did not get physical with me for disrespecting her authority, she would never take accountability and would always paint herself as the victim. Everything she did to me as a child was justified by my supposed failings, rather than acknowledging her instability and tendency to take out her frustrations on me for whatever whim she had at the time. For example, we were poor and I grew up in rags despite her receiving roughly $6,000 per month from my father. According to her, it was never enough money. It was only after I became an adult, met my wife, and moved in with her that I truly understood how calm and peaceful life could be. I realized that my relationship with my mother had been entirely one-sided and unhealthy. Breaking away took years, and it came with nothing but regret, pain, and guilt. I felt like the worst son in the world for having abandoned her, even though I was simply growing up and living my life. The justification became even clearer later. Around 6 years after I initially stopped talking to her, I attempted to throw her a lifeline. I was going to get married, and I wanted her to attend my wedding. Who would not want their mother there on that day, right? I reached out to her and asked if she wanted to attend. She said yes, and it seemed like things would finally work out. I offered to cover her tickets, clothing, meals, and accommodation. The only requests I made were that she not make the day about herself, not argue with my father, and take accountability for past actions so that we could move forward. These were the same conditions I gave to my father and brother, who agreed. She could not comply. Instead, she claimed my accomplishments were hers because it was how she raised me that instilled my drive to work hard. She insisted that everything from the past was my fault, despite my being a child and her being the parent. Hearing that was devastating. Here I was, attempting to live my life, yet she refused to make any concessions to participate. Even worse, my sister, who physically abused her, used drugs, and leeches off both her and my grandfather, could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. Yet me, who only ever tried to be a good son, who graduated high school barely, has no criminal record, worked relentlessly with no support except from myself and my wife to attend and graduate college, and who was now getting married, was not even worth the two simple words, "I am sorry." As a result, she did not attend my wedding. I chose to bar her. I refused to allow her to ruin my and my wife's day or make it about herself, as she had done with my high school graduation. I have never spoken to her again. It has been over 3 years. It hurt. She is still alive. But for me, she died that day. I will not give her any more opportunities to hurt me. She can no longer physically harm or control me, as she did when I was a child. She can no longer play mind games, isolate me, or poison my relationships. But her voice and words will forever carry a venomous pain for me until the day I die. Having her in my life is simply not worth it. I am buying my first house soon. She will never be welcome at its door. My firstborn, a son, and her first grandchild will arrive in December. She will never meet him, nor will he know her, because I will tell him she is dead. This will be the same for any other children my wife and I will have. She will never attend my doctoral graduation. I will not attend her funeral, and much more. She is not worth it. I do not hate her. I never have. She is my mother, and I will always love her. But she is an evil, sick person who only ever causes me pain. I cannot allow that in my life anymore, and I refuse to expose my family to it. They will only ever experience love, stability, support, and safety, the very things I never had and always wanted growing up. They will be the center of my world until the day I die, and nothing would make me happier than that. Everything I do in life is for them. I would not have it any other way. Story 14. I made the difficult decision to cut ties with my family. Years of toxic dynamics had taken their toll on my mental and emotional well-being. The constant criticism, emotional manipulation, and lack of support had stifled my growth and happiness. Despite my best efforts to mend the relationships and seek understanding, the toxicity persisted. It became clear that prioritizing my own well-being meant breaking free from this unhealthy environment. With a heavy heart, I chose to sever those family ties. It wasn't out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I yearned for a brighter future, one filled with positivity, love, and genuine support. In the process, I embarked on a journey of healing and self-discovery. I learned to set boundaries and rebuild my sense of self-worth. Chosen family and supportive friends became my pillars of strength, uplifting and encouraging me along the way. I realized that family is not solely defined by blood, but by the bonds of love, understanding, and respect. By creating distance from those who caused harm, I embraced my own identity without the burden of seeking constant approval. Though the decision was difficult, it was necessary for my own happiness. I found solace in reclaiming my freedom and authenticity. I walked confidently into the unknown, knowing I had made the right choice for my well-being. This journey became a testament to my resilience and the transformative power of self-love. I learned to forge my own path, free from toxic ties, and embraced the potential for a brighter future. I continue to embrace the possibilities that lie ahead, knowing that I am creating a life filled with peace, growth, and the love I truly deserve. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.